Stories about R300.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot.
Quite a few.
Good evening. I would like to call this Concord Township Zoning Commission meeting to order. Today's Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. If we could have a roll call of members, please.
Mr. Eiffelise?
Here.
Mr. Schindler?
Here.
Mr. Ruppert?
Here.
Mr. Terriaco?
Here.
And Mr. Lingenfelter?
Here. Okay, we have approval of minutes for October 3rd of 2023. I was not here, so I will not, I will abstain from the vote in the process. So if I would certainly entertain a motion, though, to either accept the minutes as provided and or any amendments. Hiram, do you have any observations for us today?
Yes, I do.
Good.
Yes, I do.
I knew you would.
Page 9, line 2. This is me talking. And it goes up to page 8, line 25. It says, what's the intent of this drive-through restaurant and coffee shop? Is it just for you or your 3 tenants? So it should be YOU, not YOU''RE. Okay, and then following on page 9, line 6, Duncan should be DUNKIN''. I think that's how, not DUNCAN. And I found that. I think I found them all. Page 25, line 5 is Duncan again. And page 26, line 4 is again Duncan. We're talking about Dunkin' Donuts. Now, I have a question. On the previous minutes that we had some sheets on the back that put all the words with where they were found. Mm-hmm. Do you still do that? Do you do that? You just didn't give it to us. Because if you could, go back and make sure I caught all the Duncan. Because I don't know if I got them all.
There was no word inventory to compare it to.
Well, there was no, we used to get those sheets.
Right.
On the back.
That's the word inventory.
Yeah.
Mr. Ruppert, that's probably, we do have that. I think we just didn't print those, but I will make sure moving forward that we give those to you guys.
I just didn't know. No, I didn't get it. So I didn't know. I went through it twice.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I got them all or not.
Okay.
So I found 3 Duncans and that one U versus UR.
Okay.
Okay? Good. That's all I have.
Anyone else? I know that's pretty hard to top, so Hiram always sets the bar high.
Yeah.
But we do appreciate your due diligence on that. Hiram. Don't think for a minute
I'm sure you
that
do.
we don't appreciate your hard efforts. Okay, so we have some corrections to be made. So I guess what we'll do is I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Mr. Ruppert.
I second it, Mr. Chairman.
No, I need somebody
Oh,
to
I
make
need
a
a
motion.
motion.
I'm asking for a motion.
I so move that we make accept the minutes as corrected.
Okay. Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain? All right. I abstain as well. So you got 3 ayes, 2 abstentions. That's the record. Okay. Correspondence. Frank, any correspondence?
None for me, Mr.
Report?
Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Ripper?
None, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Terriaco?
None.
None? Mr. Eiffelise?
Thankfully, none, Mr. Chairman.
Nothing at all. Wow. That's unusual. We didn't have any, and I personally have had no contact or any correspondence with anyone either. So it's been kind of quiet. Well, there hasn't been a whole lot going on. It's been very contentious. The first few waves hit on the other stuff.
Right,
And,
just an election.
right. Yeah, it's been quiet. Yeah, right. Okay, public participation this evening, with the agenda moving on to the next item. We don't appear to have any public participants out there today. It doesn't look like we have anyone on the phone. Anybody, Heather, supposed to call in or anything?
No, sir.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I figured I'll ask. You never know. So with that, since we don't have any public participation to participate with the public, we will move on to the new item of new business. And that is blank. So, Heather, anything coming up at all? New business-wise? Anything on the agenda?
Nothing has been submitted. No, so no new applications that I'm aware of coming your way.
Okay.
Not sure if the board has any other ideas about potential work sessions for the future. Maybe we'll do some of that work over the winter. So I can envision.
Well, I know
some
when
of
we
that.
had the kind of the general meeting over at the community center, you know, we were talking specifically about conditional use definitions and where they belong in the various resolution, you know, with the various sections in the zoning resolution. And I was thinking that it might be a good idea to put something on, you know, target at least something here in the near future to do a work session and really go over the conditional use definitions and what's there and where we're allowing things, because that seems to be what is a big bugaboo for us with regards to having things that pop up that we weren't expecting, because it falls within the conditional use. And then if it goes, you know, if it goes in front of the BZA and, you know, they find that it's acceptable and they approve it, then we don't have a whole lot of choice but to move along. So we want to make sure that, I think we need to really tighten down the acceptable uses and things of that nature, and where they go and what they belong, where they really belong, and if we want them, you know, where they are, and maybe make some changes, make some adjustments, because I think that's a good way that we can battle without painting ourselves into a corner, battle some of these issues with uses.
Okay.
So,
Well, didn't we just, I think I read someplace, maybe it was even in the minutes, where something was not allowed, period. And it's out there. It went through BZA, even though it was not allowed, it was not permitted per our zoning, and we've got it. So what good does that do?
so are you saying it was?
And it's not conditional. It's not,
I was
it's
just going to say,
prohibited.
then why was the BZA involved?
They went for a,
What was the appeal? If it's not even in there, then what difference would it make? Why would you make an appeal on something that's not even in there?
it was in the minutes. What was it?
Rezoning,
Right.
perhaps?
No.
I'm not sure what specific incident you're referring
I'm-
to,
I'm
but
not
there
familiar.
are variances for uses that the Board of Zoning Appeals has approved in the past. A use variance, so it's a use that is not typically
Right.
allowed in a district, but someone could potentially submit an application
Right.
requesting that use.
Right.
It has happened in the past. The BZA has approved use variances, but there's nothing you can do to deal with that kind of, you know, that's a function of the BZA. That's up to them to
Right.
decide whether or not it's appropriate to grant
Correct.
a variance for a use that is typically not permitted in a district.
Right. I am not as concerned with that
Yeah.
as I am with putting ourselves in a compromising position, because we have conditional uses that could
Yeah.
kind of wrap us around the axle on something we don't want
Yeah.
in a district we don't want it to be in, and then because it's conditional use, and if they meet the conditions,
Yeah.
guess what? It's something.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do about it. So
Right.
if we take the conditional use out of the district, then we don't have to worry,
Or even,
or tighten it down,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
We can make some tweaks and adjustments, whatever would seem appropriate. But yeah, I think we really need to make an effort on that, and I think with some of the development that's going on right now, and some of the interest in other businesses coming to to the community, I think we should probably try to do this sooner than later.
Okay.
I think it would make sense. As things are, things sit around and we get kind of complacent because nothing goes on for years and years and years and years and years, and then all of a sudden it's just coming at you, wham! And I would like to be a little proactive if we can instead of reactive. It's hard to be reactive in this business.
Right.
It's in the minutes from last month.
Okay. Sorry, I don't.
Page 12, line 7.
What were we talking about?
First of all, a drive-through in a PUD R2 is not a permitted use,
Oh,
okay?
yeah. Now I know. what you're talking
Heather,
about.
this is a question for you, I guess. It's not a conditional use, it's just not permitted.
Right.
Would that go before the zoning appeals? Or do they have the authority over that as well? And it goes in, Heather says that would be the Board of Zoning Appeals. They could authorize, goes back to Peterson, they could authorize even though it's not permitted? Yes.
Right. Yeah. Now that you're yes. So if you recall the ice cream store at the intersection of Old Cryle and Cryle, the ice cream store,
Right.
they
Right.
wanted
That
a
has a
drive-through,
drive-through.
but it was in the capital district, which capital districts do not allow for drive-throughs. They decided that was important to their business operation to have a drive-through, so they went to the Board of Zoning Appeals to see if the BZA would approve them a variance to allow the drive-through, which the BZA did approve.
They can do that.
Yes.
So even though it's not permitted, not a conditional,
Yeah.
which is one step lower, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. And it got approved. So why are we even talking about conditional? Right? It doesn't mean anything. You can go through BZA and get approved. Because if we say something is not permitted, just like what we did with gas stations in Capitol, somebody can come in here and put in a gas station and get it approved through BZA. So what good does it do to put it as not permitted? Unless we want to put something in here and BZA that says if it's not permitted, you got to go through us before you go through BZA. See if that works.
I don't know if that's legal, honestly.
Well,
But
that's the only way.
Well,
to
but-
make-
yeah, some communities have written to their zoning that they don't allow use variances. I mean, the use variance is supposed to be the most difficult variance that someone can get approved because you are supposed to, and I don't want to speak from a legal perspective, but you're supposed to prove that there's a hardship and
Yeah, you have to.
a hardship. There's no other use that is allowed in that district that could be put on that property for whatever the reason is. And it's supposed to be a higher standard than just some kind of, side yard setback variance or height variance. The BZA is charged with holding that to a higher standard and really reviewing that. Some of that comes with practice with the BZA. I mean, you can't always anticipate what the BZA is going to do because they are a separate board and, they go by their separate procedures. And I
Yeah,
don't think you can...
right.
I think what your work that you're doing here, as far as setting what's in the zoning resolution, what you want to allow, is still something very important that you need to do, even though there could potentially be variances granted. I don't want you to get discouraged thinking that anything we put in here is just going to be thrown out by the BZA, because that's not what they're trying to do. But there have been instances where,
But now if you
have
approve one, you can approve them all. So,
Not necessarily. I mean, each property is unique and different, so it is supposed to be specific to the site itself. So it's supposed to be a case-by-case scenario.
okay.
But I get it. It does appear to set a bad precedent.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their decision is final.
Yeah.
So when they make a decision on it to allow it, that there's nothing
But the trustees can't?
But that's really not our job. That's really not our job.
Right.
As zoning commissioners, that's not our job. That's the BZA's job. Our job is to set the policies and come up with the guidelines and put the framework together and let the BZA and the trustees use that as a tool to do what they need to do. I can't worry about the BZA going to grant somebody a variance. What am I going to do about it? You know, it's just like we come up with legislation and we forward it on, we vote on it, we have a public hearing, we vote on it, we move it on to the trustees. They could very easily overturn our decision.
And they have.
And they have. It's happened before. Or they could modify it or accept it as it's been presented. You know, they've got options. But what they do after, when it leaves here, it's out of my hands. I don't really pay any much attention. I don't really care. You know.
We're only considered a recommending board.
Right.
Yeah, well,
we do our job. I think we
that's
do our
all
due
we are,
diligence and we do what we're supposed to do and we do it well.
That's correct.
And I think whatever the product is that we forward on is usually a pretty good product. And I think it's, you know, but if they choose to make changes or they choose to you know, or deny it or refuse it, that doesn't offend me in the very least. Bluntly.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I appreciate Hiram bringing this up. I think that's real important. And I understand what you're saying, and for me, it does offend me. And I'll speak to the sheets. I mean,
Right.
we sat here 5-0 telling that developer,
No, 4-1.
whatever, it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming, and I called it the end around. On this particular design, it wasn't here. I mean, I thought it was a terrible design. I mean, that was my comments. Putting a drive-through in front of them, and then it's not a permitted use. So I thought I thought that would have been clearer to the developer, the board, hey, it's not permitted use, but he's going to go to the BZA, right? To put a drive-through in front of a warehouse, to an office.
Oh, that's this, okay.
This one.
That's this one.
This one.
That's not the ice cream store.
This one with all
Oh,
sorts
yeah.
of traffic conflicts.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so I'm not going to dwell on that. That just screams like non-Concord. That screams Mentor. Sorry, that screams to me as Mentor, not Concord Township. As commercial development. That's what we're turning into.
Well, and therein lies the challenge we have to try and come up with a framework that will help us make these issues less frequent, make it a little more difficult for these things to be you know, twisted around. You know, is there a silver bullet? No, hell no, there's not. There's no silver bullet for this. You know, but you know what? We can at least try. You know, put some stuff together that makes sense and try. So anyway, well, I appreciate
Thank you.
everybody's input.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to say on the matter? Hiram?
Bottom, I think that's a good idea. Whenever we went through, I think we went through 2 columns and looked at the uses.
Right.
And I think we need to do more and maybe even beef up the definitions or whatever it may be. I think that's a good avenue we can look at.
Right.
I do.
Frank, anything else to add?
No, you're right. But we have, there again, it's up to us to do our due diligence.
Right.
And scrutinize this stuff more thoroughly, you know, and state our reasons why something like this shouldn't be done. And bring up the thing about safety or whatever else needs to be done so that we have a case when it finally comes up to a public hearing and goes to trustees that we've submitted a good reason.
Right.
And the board in their due diligence would realize that, because we're bringing up the things that are critical and why we made our decisions. And hopefully the BZA would, yeah, well, these are good points, guys. You know, I don't think we should be allowing this to take place as long as we do our job the best we can.
Does the BZA hear our comments? If we have comments whenever we're looking at something?
I mean, it's out there. If they're looking for it, it's available. I don't know, you know, how diligently the BZA follows what you guys do at your meetings.
Well, that's what you would hope.
Right.
That they take our minutes and stuff and all the stuff we've done and look it over thoroughly before they make their decisions, realizing what we have done. And the things we have scrutinized, hopefully they take that into consideration.
Well, that's a good point. Perhaps it's our responsibility when we feel something's important
Exactly.
to author a brief
Exactly.
memo to say, hey, this is how we reviewed.
That's
From
correct.
our perspective, for your use in your decision making. I think
Correct.
that's appropriate.
Correct.
I don't know if there's any legal obstacle to doing that. Sharing an opinion.
Well, that's what we're
one
all.
board to the other.
This is what we're all up here doing, is framing our opinions,
Yeah.
right? As being a member and working on legislation, we're posting our opinions based on experience. So, and based on the will of the people. We're supposed to be governing ourselves under the comprehensive plan, for example. That's supposed to be our Bible, you know, because this is what the township and the residents over the years have wanted us to do, to keep the township a township. We know darn well they don't want us to become a city. That's been a given over the years, and all the years I've been on the board. No, we want to remain a township because we have more governing we can do with that kind of laws.
That's what they want. You're right.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Ron, you have any input? Anything you want to say on the matter?
I totally agree on the work session. I think it's always good. I'm a firm believer in it. You do have to go back and review policies and rules and regulations. That was my rule for 40 years. So you got to always refresh, because then it cleans up the complacency. And sometimes we forget what the intent was of what we wrote. So when you review it, yeah, you know what, we've been stepping out of the lane on this, and we need to bring it back into the lane. And I appreciate the work session too, as a new person coming in. That is more training for me.
That's right.
To understand the mission of what we're doing.
Super. Okay. All right, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is old business. We have a work session to review proposed text amendments to section 16, Planned Unit Development and Residential Conservation Development District. And we have some documents here we were given some documents to review and a memorandum, some of the verbiage. Heather, why don't you give us a little bit of a outline as to what we're looking at tonight?
Okay, I'd be happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. Well, at our last month's meeting, we had received some feedback from Mike Lucas at Wiles and Richard regarding some tabled amendments that we were working through over the last year or so. So we kind of brought those back to the table, and the chairman decided that we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to review those again before moving forward with setting potentially a public hearing. But I did provide a memo that kind of summarizes what the changes are per section. And I'd be happy to kind of go through that. The first amendment you'll see is in section 1613. It includes adding a new statement that basically says, once the preliminary plan has been approved by the township, that it is it's an integral part of the zoning resolution, and that you can't deviate from that. And then obviously we have a process for deviations that in future sections of this, which most of the proposed amendments tonight are really to try to clarify the process and with final development plan approval and modifications to a previously approved plan. But one of the significant changes that is proposed in this text is in section 1614. And currently, the Board of Trustees is the board that reviews the final development plan, and with this proposed change, rather than going to the trustees, it was the zoning commission that was suggested to be the board that would approve the final development plan.
Are the trustees okay with that?
We have not, I mentioned it to the trustees during a staff meeting. I really did not get feedback from them on that. I think because it's kind of early on, I think you'll get their comments, kind of as this moves through the public hearing. I know that legal counsel had questioned that and thought it seemed like he thought it would be more appropriate that if the zoning commission wanted to see the final development plan, that maybe again this board should be the recommending body to the trustees on the final development plan, and then still allowing the trustees to have the final say on that. So.
Okay.
The other changes is, from this section is kind of deleting out, some of the process, the way some of these processes and timeframes were, and moving them, to a new section, section 1616. And then this section also was adding under 1614B, a new section that talks about, what are the criteria for the zoning commission to be looking at when they're potentially going to approve a final development plan? So those are the criteria that we added in there. The next change was with section 1615. This is, we're proposing to modify this by deleting out the reference to the trustees and adding in the requirement that the proposed improvements must be constructed and accepted by the agencies before the zoning inspector is going to issue any permits. And improvements, I mean by that, like the streets, the sewer, the water. I hope that's kind of clear to everyone regarding what that intent is. Section 1616. Modifications from an approved development plan. We're going to be adding into this section the time limits and the process for previously approved development plans that might need to be modified, whether it's the preliminary plan or the final development plan. We're kind of changing the timeframes on the years too. I know that Mike Lucas had thought 3 years might be a long time. So I don't know, that was up a little bit more from, I think initially we had 1 year. But with these proposed changes, we were saying that 3 years after the preliminary plan is approved, if the first phase of the project, that the preliminary plan is void if not within the first 3 years, that the final development, why am I reading it? The preliminary plan shall become null and void unless within 3 years the final PUD or RCD plan for the first phase of the project has been approved by the zoning commission.
Well,
You want to make your
there,
comment now?
yeah, might as well.
What,
On C, last line and a half, it says, and whether a reasonable effort has been made to accomplish the plan within the original time limit. That's vague as all get out.
yeah.
So we gotta give some criteria for that.
Well, and that would be, the way this is written, it would be up to the trustees to decide, if that reasonable effort has been made. I don't know if you could come up with criteria to specify that or not. I'm not. You feel like that's too open-ended?
I do.
My point, I think the point of putting that in was to allow for extensions for some unforeseen circumstances that.
I think it's the term reasonable
Okay.
is what that's a very open to interpretation term.
Yeah.
Lawyers love to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
they don't.
Well, I mean the way they
It
fight
depends on what
things.
side of the table they're sitting on.
That's right.
Right.
That's what I
And the
meant.
same thing is in D also, C and D both have reasonable effort.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know, I don't know, Keith, if you have a comment on that. Mike didn't question that initially, so, other than the fact that he thought 3 years was already too long, so.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of make my ears perk up, but I don't know if there's a better way to word it. If you do want to make an extension available, if you did something cut and dry, like if an application is submitted within 3 years, okay, then that's not leaving things up to interpretation. When you say reasonable, it does make me wonder, okay, well, what's reasonable about this and not reasonable about that? And unfortunately, sometimes that does just get defined in lawsuits, but you always want to try to avoid that.
Keith, I guess I'll draw from my engineering background. Typically, because my notes here about within a reasonable effort, is in the judgment of. So it defines who makes the judgment as reasonable. In this case, the zoning official, I would say. And I say that because lots of times we have this language where it's in the judgment of the engineer, we deem whether that's acceptable, not somebody. It's just defining some person, not a body, but an individual. I think is what Hiram's looking for, some definition of reasonable in the judgment of is a suggestion. I also thought where did the 3 years come from? Did we suggest 3 years?
I don't know.
No, I don't recall.
I put that in there as a suggestion,
Okay.
because I think we
That's
had
what your
1 year
experience?
initially. Well, I mean, I saw some, looking at some other communities' resolutions as well.
Okay.
But I get it if 3 years is too long. So basically what happens after preliminary plan is approved by the township, they still have to likely go to Lake County Planning and
Yes.
work through the subdivision
Yes.
review process. And then, so they have to go to the Lake County for preliminary review on a subdivision, and then go to the county for their final development plan review as well, and then still come back to the trustees or the zoning commission for the final township development plan. So I don't know, it could take more than a year to do that on the first phase if something were to come up, but
Oh, for sure.
maybe
No,
some
I'm not-
delay on a permit for.
I'm actually, my comment is I think it's reasonable. It's reasonable to avoid
Yeah.
often extensions because all of the agencies, we can't make this, it has to go through all those agencies.
Right, there's other
I think
parties, you know.
it's reasonable.
I think it would be difficult to come up with a list of what items could be considered reasonable, honestly, like, but,
Well, so much, especially in the construction industry.
Yeah, right.
Nowadays, it's very difficult.
Have
You have weather concerns that you run into. Right now, we're going into a stage in the world with global warming about how stuff can be done, when it can be built. Material availability is becoming critical, and the work that I do, a lot of my customers are finding it difficult to get, parts, equipment, and everything like that, and availability, which can extend deliveries out considerably. So, 3 years, I guess, going the way we're going, maybe it might not be so bad. Could be reasonable, as you said.
Mr. Chair, I had some general comments, but I didn't know if Heather was finished overviewing.
She was just about
I'm
done.
almost done, yeah,
Okay.
but if it's germane to this section, then we can.
No, it's general.
Okay. All right, 16, yeah. If you recall, we made a couple changes to what are considered the major modifications, just changing the location of the required pavement widths. And then the other potential changes are in the part 2 of the zoning of this section 16 that are applicable to the RCD option. 16.29, we're proposing to strike out from subsection B. That the final development plan is set forth in section 16. This is a housekeeping cleanup thing based on the changes that we are making in part A or part 1. And then 2 other sections, section 1630. Again, similar to in the part 1, just to reflect that all the improvements must be constructed and approved before we're going to issue permits for zoning permits to start building homes or businesses or whatever it is in the PUD, or this is RCD rather. And then the last one is just modifying section 16.31 to add time frame and limitations to mirror what we do in part 1.
Part one.
Okay, Rich.
Okay.
Unload, baby.
Chairman, I'll unload. So, first of all, if you recall when we talked about this, the proposing this due to some hiccups we had in some other preliminary plans that didn't come back to us, that got changed down the road. So I really appreciate the direction coming to the zoning commission, should the trustees be okay with that. But if that's the intent, spirit of the legislation, then I'm wondering about the consistency of it. So I'll begin with the pre-application conference. So that's on page 16.8, or section 16.11, pre-application conference. So if the intent of this, the PUD and RCD, is for the zoning commission to review, and then final, then is it necessary, is it consistent to, right now, it includes the trustees in pre-app in 1611, and then it includes the trustees in 1612. That's got to be notified for a township preliminary plan. Maybe that's just a notification, and that's okay. But so anyhow, that's just a question for consistency of approach. If this is to be modeled for the zoning commission to run through the steps with us. You understand what I'm?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think it's appropriate to leave it in these two steps, because at any pre-application, or for any new RCD or PUD, it's going to require a rezone and an approval of the preliminary plan. So
Yes.
we're not changing that first step. So it's still going to go through the same zoning amendment process and a preliminary plan
okay.
approval process, which requires this board
Okay.
to give the recommendation to the trustees on the
Okay.
rezone and the preliminary
But they're
preliminary
involved.
plan.
Okay, that
And
makes
then
sense.
the trustees still make the final decision.
Makes sense.
And they could accept, your recommendation
Got it.
on it, or they could modify it,
Okay.
or but
That
then
makes sense.
the second, so
That
I'm
makes
good
sense.
with leaving it.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. And then under the first 1613, I, the insert. This goes to Hiram's comment about reasonable. The plan approved in accordance with this shall be an integral part, and any departure from this plan. In my mind, that needs definition. Who determines that? Again, I would say in the judgment of the zoning official. Who determines the departure, that the preliminary plan has any departure from the plan? Understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it implies that it would be the zoning inspector, because I'm charged with enforcing the zoning resolution, or do we have to say that, or how do we? Yeah.
Well, I leave it to the board. I'm just thinking, as we find things that we close up a loop. I think that's a little loop there. If we can say, in the judgment of, that's just my comment on I. I found a Hiram on 1614. I had to say that.
See the influence you have on people,
1614B.
Hiram.
1614 what?
B, number 2, 1614B, 2, letter C.
Oh,
Wait a minute.
The internal streets and thoroughfares proposed.
B2.
B2, letter C.
Yeah, I see where he's at.
It's just
I know.
it's just a
What page?
It's like the all red.
This one?
1613,
B2.
1614. Did I say 13?
Yeah.
Here's B, we got two Bs.
It's the new B.
We got two
Right.
Bs.
It's the new B.
Right.
Yeah, B2, well, I see it,
Right there.
but don't we have a B on
Yeah, we do.
1612?
Probably gotta get fixed.
Oh yeah, that should
Yeah.
be a C there.
Should be a C.
So that should be a C.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Hiram one-upped me on my typo.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Now I'm not finding yours.
He's like that.
Yeah, so
Okay,
C.
so go ahead.
Okay, so then to the 3-year, well, not actually the 3 years. So now I'll go to 1616 C and D. So up to this point, it's been the zoning commission, but the extension is to be granted by the trustees. Is it proper for them to intervene at this point to be able to enter into Is it fair to them if they haven't been involved in the process to grant an extension?
Yeah.
That's C and D. That's just otherwise that was it. I had, Mr. Chairman.
Anything, Mr. Terriaco?
I do not. I'm learning and listening.
Okay, and thank you for your due diligence there, Mr. Ifelis. That was well done. Appreciate the effort. Frank,
Pleasure.
anything?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just feel that I'm glad to see this, to be honest with you.
Right.
Because this is the thing I've been wanting for a long time, ever since the development took place on Heisley there. That this gives us more control. And that's what I was basically looking for. So the theme here, I feel very comfortable with.
Good.
Yeah, sure, words and stuff have to be adjusted and massaged, but the intent I like. I like the intent. I'm happy.
Good stuff. Hiram, you've got
have-
some more things. You've got a couple
I've
more
got-
birds under your saddle,
got-
don't you?
No, it's not a bird at all.
What do we got?
1617. A1 and A2. If the zoning inspector shall find blah, 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 comma, he shall issue orders to the developer. Shouldn't that be a he/she? Or the zoning inspector? That would make it clear. But it's not a he. And it's not a she in all cases either, so. I
Well, you-
think
you
it
could
should
maybe leave
be a
the-
he/she, she?
Well, why don't we just leave the gender out?
Yeah.
Well, I like I liked the idea of substituting that with the inspector. That way, it keeps it very it's
Right.
It's neutered.
Leave,
gender
that's
non-specific.
right, leave the gender out. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think that's a happy. It's a happy medium. So just get rid of he and insert inspector, or the inspector, or whatever would be
I think it
appropriate.
should be the inspector.
Yeah, the inspector shall forward and
I'll
the
put,
inspector.
how about the zoning inspector?
shall
Should we
issue.
say it?
That's
Should we-
fine.
Okay, all right.
Fine, that's fine.
I think Hiram's just trying to find more than I have.
He's digging. He's digging.
I had that before you.
Anything else, Hiram?
No, sir.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Heather, for the work. Did a nice job getting this put together.
And the patience.
Yes. And if we don't have any further input on this work session, I guess I would entertain a motion to put a public hearing on the agenda. Anyway, I think we would have enough time to do it in December, Heather?
Yeah, it would meet the time requirements.
Would meet the requirements?
If you wanted to do it at the December 5th.
If you wanted to put this on next month's agenda with a public hearing, we have the time frame. So, I mean, if somebody wants to make a motion and set that date, we can do it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we put our changes to section 16, R2 Plain Unit Development District and Residential Conservation Development District on the agenda for a public hearing in December.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Let the record reflect that we have 5 ayes and no nays, no abstentions. Okay, so we've got a public hearing set. Good job. Nice work. I don't think, is there anything anybody would like to see on next month's agenda added to new business or any other things we want to talk about?
Nothing here, Mr. Chairman.
No, sir. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. With that, I will set the next meeting, December 5th of 2023, and this meeting is adjourned.